Hey everyone, this is Matt. Before we start, let me give you a heads up. In this episode, Tony and I discuss the results of the election. As we do in every episode, we share our thoughts, but we totally respect everyone's right to support the candidate of their choice. Our goal is to create a safe space where everyone's ideas matter, and we hope you'll join us with an open mind and a commitment to free speech as we deconstruct this year's election results. How do you want to start this one?
I don't know. Maybe let's just in commemoration of this week. Let's just call it the Freewheelin episode. So what are we gonna talk about? We're gonna talk about this week. I'm sure everybody knows what's happened this week. This is elections have happened. Still counting, but overall, I think it's been pretty much acknowledged who won the 47th presidency.
Kamala did concede.
Kamala did concede, but so election, of course, and because of election, I think it was a very big week for the stock market. So then we talk a little bit about that, and just I think everybody this week needed to kind of talk through, get supports, etc. But why not?
So how
Why
was
not?
it in Dallas? By the way, when you voted, were you able to vote for Texas, or did your vote count towards the Bay Area?
Texas.
Good.
But it's kind of, I think it really is by there's like groupings of areas. I don't know if Dallas is becoming a little bit more liberal, and just because of, I guess, of the demographics of where I live specifically, but it's a bit younger families, a younger demographic. And so I definitely, as I drive around, you see more, Harris Waltz type, kind of like the Trump MAGA signage. So I think it varies, but obviously Texas is still, mostly red.
Well, I mean, that's the thing though. Like, if you look at the election result per county, the big cities are always blue. The big cities are always
typically.
Democratic. Even Miami this time around, Florida is a heavy Republican state. But if you look at Florida, Miami was one or two, blue counties that are Democratic. And so I think that's the thing. Like, metropolitans, big cities are always voting for Democratic. And so it's typically rural / smaller population cities that always vote Republican. And this time around, I think if you get fascinated by kind of how the election results came to be, if you're not, then continue listening, because that's what we like to do. We'll deconstruct it a bit and talk about it. But one of the big reasons why Trump won this time is because there was less margin of defeat in these blue cities. So, for example, Miami, when Biden won 4 years ago, he won by something like 60% versus 40%, right? Whereas this time around, it was more like 50-something% versus high 40%. So the margin of defeat in these blue cities decreased significantly, which means that more people swung towards voting for Donald Trump this time around versus Kamala. One of the popular maps that have been being passed around is this map that shows the election results and has these arrows that are either going to the right in red and short or long, and it has arrows going to the left and blue and short or long. That just tells you, compared to last election, like how far to one side did that county move. And for the majority of the nation, it was mostly to the right. So yeah, that was interesting. I live here in Washington, and looking at all these maps, it's clear to me that Washington is a huge Democratic state that's strong blue. So I often think to myself, am I living in this little bubble here where everything that I see in my media and news is biased towards Democrats? I always have that type of thought. And I know based on my values and ideals, that's probably the stuff I get, but media played a big part in this, right?
Apparently so. Whether Yeah, I've seen a lot of commentary on, I guess, after whatever election day, everybody came out with their reason why the Harris campaign did so
Yeah.
poorly, and like
What'd you
how
hear?
could they lose? How could they lose with spending $1 billion? I mean, everything under the people were grasping for straws or grasping for air. Anyways, you get my point. The message focusing too much on Trump, like why he was not the right candidate or what he was going to do, and they should have spent more time focusing on their policies. Somewhere like it was because Biden shouldn't have even, you know, nominated or, said he was going to run. That way the party had more time to, actually go through a nominee process, because that was a big stigma. It's just all sorts of things. It's like, where was all this commentary before, right? Albeit it was a very quick thing that happened. But I mean, again, it's like it's either hindsight or everybody's just looking for a reason. And of course, if you spend time on Twitter, which I guess Twitter, I'm just gonna call it Twitter, since Elon wants it to be the town hall. Of course, I spent plenty of time on Twitter to see what people were thinking. And of course, it's kind of like we were kind of talking about this offline. It's like the conspiracy theories were starting to crop up, which was like I was almost
Yeah.
being convinced. It was like the non MAGA, conspiracy theories, which is
Let's
kind of interesting.
I actually haven't heard any conspiracy theories yet, so I'm curious, like, what you heard. I wanna react to that, but before we get to that, I
Yeah.
wanted to address what you're saying around the hindsight comments, 'cause that's what I've been hearing too. They're all hindsight, like, "Oh,
Yeah.
she lost because of X, Y, Z,"
Yeah.
and I agree with you. Where were these things ahead of time? So, yeah, what I had heard is that no candidate has ever won the White House coming from a president that has a low rating. So,
Yeah.
Joe Biden has pretty low approval rating, and
Yeah.
in the past, no candidate trying to run has ever, won that. Second is perhaps her timeline for campaigning was just not enough. And so that plus what I just said was essentially like she was never going to win. The other thing I heard was, and I kind of agree with, is at the end of the day, people, especially in, non metros that maybe just use media in a different way,
Hmm.
just resonate with the person that's talking about them and what's affecting them the most. And in this case,
Yeah.
it is Donald Trump's message was, "Are you better than you were 4 years ago?"
Yeah.
And and while the economy is very strong, most people aren't because everything is super expensive. And so just focusing on the economics and is a key message that won for him, while Kamala was more focused on, freedom and change
Yeah.
and going forward versus going back. So the messaging was a big part of it as well. The interesting thing is, whenever I look at these electoral maps, it's like 80% of the population concentration is within these Mideast states. And so that's like where I guess, our candidates have to go to win the vote. And the second thing that was interesting is, the West Coast here, we're always primarily blue,
Hmm.
but California swung a lot. Even though Kamala won California, they swung heavy to Republican
Yeah.
compared to in the past. So that's
Yeah.
very interesting because what does that say for the future? So yeah, those are some of the things I heard too related to hindsight. But yeah, hindsight's always 2020, and
Yeah.
yeah, now all these things are coming out. It's like, okay, so it's not very useful. It's interesting, but not very useful. So What are some of the conspiracy things that you're?
Yeah, so it's so like on the MAGA side, there was one, I guess they were trying to justify the win, and they were going through like how was it that, Biden won by such a large margin relative to this round? Like where did, these tens of millions of votes that he got, where did they go? Because they didn't show up, right? So I thought that was interesting that there is a need.
Mm,
They felt they needed to look for another conspiracy on why they
they wanted
lost the
more
last
votes.
election. Yeah, why they lost the last election.
Oh, compared to last, like they're saying this proves that he should have won the last election.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Right. It's like, and then on the flip side, I guess on the other side, people are like, where did those people go? Right? What happened? And then you start seeing these things about people posted how their ballots were rejected, or like they were either outright rejected because like the signature didn't match and they had to like fix it, or what was some of the other ones I saw? Mail-in ballots were rejected because they didn't meet the deadline or they weren't delivered in time,
Yeah.
but they were going off the delivery date and not the postmark date, which is kind of odd because typically you go off the postmark date because you can't control, right? So maybe ballots disappeared through the post office, which we know the postmaster general um, had his issues back during the last election because he had basically dismantled a lot of the postal service, right before the election. And so it's just like things like that. Again, people are just coming up like, well, really, like what happened to these millions of voters who voted last time that didn't show up or just disappeared this
Yeah.
round, right?
Well, the thing that like I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
in this 2024, why is voting so archaic still?
Yeah, right.
I mean, I was following election stuff going on the evening of and saw this live stream where someone was at Arizona State University and there was a huge line and the line was something like over 2 hours long.
Mm-hmm.
And you had Pennsylvania where they were telling people to stay in line because the polls couldn't close until the last person voted,
Yeah,
but it was late at night. And so that
yeah,
means that there's just like a line that was taking probably hours just to get through.
yeah,
And so for me, it's 2024. We're creating self-driving cars and rockets that land themselves and
yeah,
artificial intelligence. Why is
yeah,
voting so archaic still?
yeah. But it is what it is. So at this point, it'll be interesting to see how the next couple of years play out. The other funny things is I guess people are starting to look at Google search trends. Like there's spikes in people searching for Project 25, spikes in people looking for what is a tariff.
What is it here?
Or yeah. And it was just funny, and I think that's kind of like the irony of it, right? Now that he is president, people are looking to see like, all right, what is this tariff people keep talking about,
Yeah.
right? Or what is this Project 25 that people keep talking about? And so I think that's what it's just like, we'll see, right? It's just about Trump. It's just like whatever is top of mind is what'll happen. And of course,
Yeah.
Elon, most recently, I thought this was really funny. It's like, so Trump had his conversation with Zelensky, right, about Ukraine. And apparently Elon was part of that call. And I'm thinking to myself, where's Vance? Shouldn't Vance be part of that call? And so to me, it makes me like, all right, Vance is like VP name only.
Hmm.
Elon's kind of bought himself the role of VP, the
Yeah.
silent VP.
Definitely want to talk about Elon in a little bit. I wanted to, sorry, you were saying something there.
Yeah, interject.
You were saying something and then I was going to respond. Let's see. What were we talking about right before Elon?
Google Trends.
But so Jimmy Kimmel, if you ever watch Jimmy Kimmel,
Yeah, I watch him.
you know how much
I watched his like
his reaction,
his lead is
a Trump hater.
yeah
They have beef together, but
yeah
he worded it this way, and by all means, I just wanted to make sure that neither of us are taking sides. We're just trying to talk about what's going on and the
Mhm.
reactions to elections. But Jimmy Kimmel was pretty strong in saying that people who have voted for Trump don't realize what they voted for that's going to happen in the next 4 years.
Yeah.
And he's referring to like one of those things, right? Like tariffs. I think what people don't understand is there's pros and cons to tariffs. Trump wants to raise tariffs because he wants to bring more jobs to the U.S. If we raise tariffs for imports coming from China, for example, I think he said he wants to raise them 100, 200%.
Yeah.
Like a lot. Basically, have a tax on things that aren't coming from the U.S.
Right.
Then what will companies do? They'll want to build things in the U.S. so that they don't have to deal with these tariffs.
Yeah.
However, companies don't have the infrastructure needed to build things in the US right now. That's going to take time. And so the short term effect is everything you get from China will be twice as much now
Mhm.
because that company has to pay tax on sending something here.
Yeah.
So that's going to come down to the consumer, to us.
Yeah.
So that's actually going to theoretically increase inflation again.
Yeah.
And people are going to have to be paying more. So the pro is, okay, get more things built in the US. However, there's a negative to that too, because labor is not as cheap in the US as it is in somewhere like China.
Yeah. Yeah. 3 or 4 times more
Yeah.
here. Right.
And
Yeah.
so that's going to impact companies in how it builds. And so by you telling me that that a Google trend is people looking up, oh, what are tariffs? It just
Yeah.
tells us they don't know what they
Yeah, it's
voted
it's
for.
funny, right? It's kinda telling. It's just it's really funny. To be honest, like, a lot of his talked about policies, like, I'm gonna benefit greatly from it, right? So
Yeah,
so it's like, "All right, less taxes, more money. Hey, I'm all for it. I get to retire more early," So it's not about that. It's just like,
and then
yeah.
how'd you feel about, so the other big part of this campaign was immigration, right? And from what we
I
know, he swung up huge on the Latino vote.
it's I know,
What do you
it's
make of that?
super interesting, right?
Yeah,
It because, like, if you think about the demographic that would likely be most affected is probably the Latino community, right? Because of, Trump has this obsession with the border and Mexico, right? And so whether it actually plays out or not, right? We will find out day one, right, what his deportation policy is going to be. But,
yeah,
there's a lot of downstream effects to it, right? I do agree. Like illegal immigration is something that needs to be solved.
totally.
Whether mass deportation, I think I've seen some examples of people referencing the Japanese intermittent camps
Yeah,
back in the day, right? And so that sounds very dystopian, very Black Mirror-ish, but it could happen, right? Especially with this mandates that Trump apparently has with both the electorate and the popular vote. And so people just might go, okay, it's fine. Yeah, let's put all the illegals into these camps,
but see, as a
right?
Latino, how do you vote for that? Like, you're basically saying, okay, any family that I've been able to get over here,
Mhm.
illegally, they're gonna go
Yeah,
back.
yeah, yeah. I actually might need to spend time also to like read Project 25 because I haven't.
But Trump said he has no association with Project, but he doesn't even know what Project 25 is.
That's we all know he knows what it is. Or at least most of his future administration probably knows what it is. And so I've even heard some wild things of they want to get rid of um, naturalization, like birthright naturalization,
Hmm.
and potentially have the capability to take away your citizenship for people who were naturalized, I guess you'd
Your
have to
birth, just solely.
not through birth, but like even people who have gone through the green card and naturalization
Oh,
process, like to be able to take that away, which that's actually kind of scary. But I don't know how they do that because like Melania obviously is not a native, U.S.
Yeah.
citizen, right? Trump, not Trump. Elon himself is not even native.
Yeah.
I think people forget Elon's actually South African.
Mhm.
He's not American. But anyways,
Yeah. So let's talk about Elon. And I know you referenced it earlier. So yeah,
Mhm.
Elon seems to be the biggest winner other than Trump out of this whole election.
The greatest investment ever.
Yeah.
Have you
He,
seen that? A lot of people have been talking about it, where his $120 million donation super PAC
yeah.
basically grew his net worth by how many billion this past week?
15.
It's insane. I'm not complaining because I made some money off of it. So hey,
But I mean, Elon was like clearly his, yeah, clearly his number two. Whereas I feel like Vance was kind of absent throughout the whole
I
election day.
have not seen anything about
Well,
Vance
he was
since the
there as
election.
part of the acceptance speech.
But like that, I mean, like again, like a figurehead, right? And now he's just been totally like, who is Vance?
Yeah, yeah. But Elon has been that clear, I guess, number two. And then the other person that was featured in the photos going around on that night is Dana White. So Dana White, Elon, and Trump. There's a photo of them talking, at the dinner table.
Yeah, yeah,
Someone posted this meme that was like CEO, CMO, Dana White, and then CTO, Elon.
yeah. No, I mean, so I mean, we'll see how Elon's, what is it? How do we know his Department of Efficiency, whatever, Doge,
Department of Cost Cutting.
yeah, Department of Cost Cutting. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
It's one thing to do that to a company, i.e., Twitter. It's another thing to do it as a government entity. So we'll see.
Agree with you. However, I
I
like
mean,
it. I like
yeah,
it because we're in tech, and
yeah,
we know that anytime you use some type of government product, government website, it's just crap.
yeah,
And that's because, that's scrapped.
yeah,
They don't invest in
yeah,
technology, and they're
yeah,
probably, government is probably bloated in terms of who they're paying for, what they're
yeah,
paying for.
yeah,
So for someone like Elon Musk to come in, I agree with you. It's a Herculean task that probably won't really make much of a dent because it's a cultural thing that's been ingrained in the culture for the last 50, 60 years. But I don't know. Like if he's coming in to make things efficient and make things better from a technical perspective,
yeah,
and he can do that, then that's cool.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see like how he approaches it, because it's different, right? It's like, he came. It's not like you can come in and say, all right, I'm going to fire 80% of the government and then fill in the holes as I go. There's just too much at stake for something like that,
You
right?
know,
Yeah.
we've been talking mostly about Trump and some of the things that people said about him, some of the whatnot. I do think there were some things said about Kamala too. So I think before we started, I was referencing the All In podcast. I don't want to talk too much about what they said. If you're interested, go take a listen. But they did start to say hindsight that, commenting that Kamala was somewhat of a horrible candidate.
Mhm.
They said that, Trump just spoke to the people genuinely.
Yeah.
Chamath actually said he he made a pretty strong statement, which I was surprised at because I hadn't heard it before. Chamath, he's pretty well known figure, former like growth person at Pace. Hey, he's a rich guy, smart guy too.
He's another billionaire.
Yeah, but he
Pushed
said that
SPACs.
he said he said that he's talked to every presidential candidate in the last like 3 or 4 cycles because he's a donor, and he said that Trump was the only candidate that he's talked to in the last 3 or 4 cycles that actually talked to him on the phone to like want to know what's going on versus the other candidates. He even referenced Obama who just talk to him because they want money from him. So that was a pretty interesting statement. And so they're saying how much Kamala was just, again, the same type of candidate, and Democrats are this people who are, elitists and whatnot. So yeah, and the last thing about Kamala is, and I think I agree with this fully. They're saying one of the fundamental things that changed the election was the Joe Rogan podcast. You heard about this, right?
Yeah.
Of how she didn't want to attend, or she didn't want to be on the podcast, but Trump did go to the podcast.
Yep.
And so that swung a lot of, especially young male voters, to vote in his way because she wasn't willing to get vulnerable. And I completely agree that was a bad move. They're saying they could have sent Tim Walz instead, just someone to represent. So yeah, where was that? Where was that advisement?
Yeah. She ended up being on SNL instead, right? Which is
a little cameo.
Yeah, which is like, that people who watch SNL are probably not the group that you.
People who watch SNL are fluke.
Yeah.
Let's switch over to talking about the market now, because the market was fun this week after election.
Crypto is just like, it's right now the market is insane on how quickly you make money, and the regulations around it are just like it's so ridiculous. It makes no sense whatsoever, right? And so that I'm actually kind of interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the market today was a tear.
Well,
so whether it was because elections, there was this fear that, it would drag out for like weeks and weeks and weeks, but it was just like, it's pretty like day after, like typically it is, right? We know who the president is, move on. And I think that's what set the market off, right?
Yeah. So let's recap a little bit. So S&P 500 up 5% for the week. Bitcoin since the election,
all-time highs,
up about 12%. And yes, they hit all-time highs. And then Tesla, who was the other benefactor of this election, up 32% over the week. And then the last one is DJT, who went down. So that was more of a sell the news idea. But I mean, after the election, it went up 18%. And for the week, it's still, actually, it's not. After the election, it went up 5%. And then for the week since the election, it's down 7%.
Yeah. It's great. It's a great week overall.
Yeah. So yes, crypto super bullish because Donald Trump is more bullish on crypto, more supportive of crypto, and having Elon Musk there is only going to add to that, because we know how much Elon Musk is supportive of crypto. And yeah, I was looking at the Tesla chart. So the week before the election, when Tesla hit the low of 212, since then it's up about 56%.
Yeah. I know.
That's crazy.
Should have gone in. It's like I knew it, but anyways.
Hindsight, Tony.
Hindsight, exactly. Hindsight. Whatever. Let's see. I think it'll eventually get it back to its all-time high.
Tesla? Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
it's not too far off at this point.
Most every big company this year has got to all-time highs. So Tesla's the only one who hasn't.
Yeah.
And I think some of that was being suppressed by Elon's involvement with the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree with you. So it's a good buy and hold. It's not financial advice though. The other thing that's going to work in Tesla's favor, but also tech companies in general, is, because Elon is there to influence regulations around autonomous driving, right? Should be on the table for adjusting or loosening.
Yeah. I think that was the overall sentiment too, right? On, at least I say, on Wall Street, what I've seen and read, right? It's just because with the Republican Party, it tends to favor businesses more, meaning mergers and acquisitions, right? The DOJ has been very adamant about, not depending on your viewpoint, right? The DOJ has done its job in preventing, in making sure the marketplace remains competitive by these big companies not being able to acquire everybody and end up driving up prices. But the Republican Party, it's more of, I think the expectation, right, is M&A is back on the table. I think that was financials were up greatly, like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Morgan
Banks.
Stanley, with the expectation of them earning more money, right, to do these big acquisitions. I think, for instance, like Amazon tried to acquire iRobot, everybody's favorite little automated vacuum, but the DOJ kind of shut that down. In a Trump administration, maybe that would likely have gone through. Just an example for people who are not, again, for people who might need to search for what a tariff is. That's kind of what I'm talking about.
The thing that is going to be impacted, though, got impacted this week, went down. EVs, other than Tesla, because on the Kamala ticket, renewable energy, electrification, that was what they supported. Whereas on this side, Trump and Republicans are more in favor of gas. And so EVs, other than Tesla, took a hit. Rivian actually missed earnings, but they did guide for profitability in Q4. And so it was just neutral after earnings. So glad people didn't sell on the missed earnings, because I was loading up a little bit into Rivian. But that'll be one to watch. I think I'm still very bullish on Rivian, but this Trump administration is going to add more headwinds to the company. And then I think Lucid might just die, which, that's all I'll say there. And then the other ones that are going to take a hit are Chinese stocks because of the tariffs, right? Like, if we're going to be tariffing China primarily, it's going to get the hit. Chinese stocks going to have more barriers to entry into the US. They're going to maybe make less money. So I started selling out of my NEO position because it is both EV and Chinese. Is there any other impacts in terms of like companies or stocks that come to mind for you?
What else was I think those were the big ones, at least in the part of the markets that I kind of pay attention to, right? Healthcare is another one. I think that just depends on what the concept for future healthcare looks like in the US, right? That will likely affect a lot of the big healthcare providers. Real estate. What is it? Real estate. Again, it just depends. There's just so many unknowns, like who knows? But again, like, it's stuff that really doesn't impact me like directly per se, other than I was looking to buy a new dishwasher. I might have to do that this year and not next year before those prices and inevitably go up.
You start getting tariffed?
Before those get tariffed. Maybe not fully assembled in China, right? But a lot of the parts are produced in that part of the world, and they're just kind of imported and put together. All of Apple's products are mostly manufactured in China. And so I wonder what Tim Cook is what he's going to whisper to Trump to say, like, hey, we need some exceptions. Can't double the price of iPhone, Android, any phone. You can't, right? It's like, we just don't have that capability. And to build up that capability here in the US would take, a decade, right?
This is an interesting thread. So I agree with you. Yeah, they can't double the price of iPhone. iPhones are already super expensive. So I kind of see it as maybe, sure. Well, then does that mean that iPhone doesn't have to increase every year? Does that mean that like they can maybe like eat into their margins for iPhone? Because Apple is one of the richest companies in the world, right? They have something like $100 billion in the bank. And the reason for that is because they make high margin and they charge so much. And that's capitalism. And as a consumer, we can't live without it. But they're still price gouging us. So I guess that's a positive. Like, if someone can crack down on that, then that'd be great.
But it's like it's a business, right? Businesses are here to make money, not to be charities, right?
Yeah.
So if people are willing to pay a certain amount,
And that,
I do the same thing, right? It's like, yeah, I will charge as high as you're willing to pay, right? It's like
yeah.
I don't care.
And so that's a, thank you. Like I really wanted to talk about this point because it was related to earlier when we were talking about election thoughts and GDP. I
Mm-hmm.
think, that the economy is actually really strong right now. Like our
Mm-hmm.
GDP has been growing, meaning our gross domestic product, our country has been growing.
Mm-hmm.
But the rebuttal is the consumer doesn't feel that though. Like
Yeah.
when I go to eat pho, I boycotted pho because last time I went to eat pho, it was $18.
Mm.
And I remember
Yeah.
spending like $10 to $12 for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, screw it for broth, noodles, and
Yeah.
sliced up beef. You're going to charge me
Yeah.
$18.
Yeah.
So I boycotted it. And so I think the thing is like, yes, we don't feel a strong economy on the consumer side. And the
Yeah.
reason for that is because these CEOs and these corporations make 20x, 50x what the average consumer makes. And so
Mm-hmm.
while there's high growth in GDP, while there's a strong economy,
Mm-hmm.
it's the 1% that's actually reaping the benefits.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that's the problem. Yeah.
Doge. People think Doge will hit $1. I still can't bring myself to buy Doge.
I think I texted you. I said, yeah, I just have my bag there. If it hits $1, then that's awesome. But just got a bag there that I'm just not selling. It's because
Yeah.
the Elon effect, maybe it will hit $1.
Yeah. It's like what, 20 cents now? It's up like 100% since like the election.
The one that people have been disappointed in is Ethereum.
Yeah.
I sent you that table. That shout out to Stocks with Josh.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't listen to him, that's a great channel. But he was sharing this table of the best performing cryptos in the year, and of the three, I guess, primary cryptos were Solana, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. And
Yep.
Bitcoin and Solana were probably up over 80% this year,
Yeah.
while Ethereum is only up like 5%.
Yeah.
So it's been lagging for some reason, even though that was a pretty hot one, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
My biggest crypto stake is in Ethereum as well. So
Is it really?
yeah,
Yeah. I sold all my Ethereum on the last bull run. Yeah. So I have nothing. Well, Pendle. Pendle. I'm gonna all in Pendle and just pray it hits 100, and then I'll be able to retire.
if you're all in and needing to pray for it, that's a bet.
I think that's what 2025 is going to be about. It's place your bets and
Place your
hope for the best. Yeah, place your bets and hope for the best. Because I mean, like at this point, it's like, yeah, that's what you have to look for, right? It's like Bitcoin. I mean, realistically, if you invested in Bitcoin today, what is it going to do? Double your money? That's right. Not what crypto
Yeah.
about. Crypto is about you make 100x. Otherwise, what's the point?
Well, yeah, and just remember, this isn't financial advice. These are our personal opinions, and always manage your risk is what I would say.
Yeah.
All right, we had a long episode, so let's get in. It was a good conversation around elections, stocks, and whether you're for Trump or against Trump. Hopefully, everyone is continuing forward. This is our next 4 years, no matter what side of the coin you're on. The most that we can do is support each other and support what we need to do to continue having a thriving America. Those are my parting words.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll talk next week again and come back to Tech News of the Week. Thanks for joining us in this special election and stock market episode. See you, Tony.
Later.